The best brands define their PR wow in a clear, concise, and compelling way to attract major media coverage, fans, and sales. Find out their marketing and public relations secrets today on 8 Second Branding with host Liz H. Kelly. Liz is the founder of Goody PR and the author of 8 Second PR. In each episode, she brings you the stories behind some of the best brands, CEOs, and authors. Plus, she explains how media appearances alone are 3 times more valuable than any paid ad. Now, here's your host, Liz Kelly.
Hello, this is Liz Kelly with 8 Second Branding, getting to your PR wow. And we have the most awesome guest today. Scott Monty was named #1 social business leader by The Economist in the top 25. And we met him at South by Southwest when he was working with Ford Motor Company. And we've connected on LinkedIn, and we're going to talk a lot about the power of social media. But first, Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Liz. It's a pleasure to be here on one of your inaugural episodes. This is great.
Well, we are really honored, and we want to hear more about your background. We want to talk about campaigns that you did for Ford, but also some of your other clients and recent things. And one of the things we noticed is on your LinkedIn, you talk about how with your clients, you use 3 things, and they are history, literature, and philosophy. So can you talk about that?
Absolutely. I was years ago, back when the Earth was still a molten mass, I guess, I was a classics major as an undergrad. And I often struggled with how I would actually use that degree. To me, it was just a placeholder until I went to graduate school and figured out what I wanted to do with my life. And having spent time at a company the size of Ford, you get to see a lot of things, and you get to see a lot of swaths of humanity all around the globe, right? And in doing so, I recognized patterns. I recognized things that were repeating themselves over and over again. And as I look back to the education I had, I realized, this isn't unique to the 21st century. These are things that we keep repeating as human beings over time. And these lessons have been written out for us in numerous books and stories and poems and, works by philosophers. That why can't we take some of that knowledge and package it up and make it relevant for people today?
I love that analogy. And can you give an example? You had a recent success story, didn't you, using that?
I actually was somehow tagged by the Biden inaugural committee. They came to me and they said, look, we are struggling with trying to make this inauguration important to Republicans as well as to Democrats. It stands to reason that Democrats would obviously want to celebrate the inauguration of a Democratic president. But what about those Republicans who might feel a little disingenuous about it, or might feel as if they're not part of this? And we talked for a while, and it was really a conundrum for me. How do you take a world as divisive as we are now and create something that appeals to everyone? And after thinking about it for a moment, I said, well, why not go back and look at historic inaugurations, right? Inaugurations, particularly at times in history when we were divided, and use those stories and those examples and those speeches as a way to kind of frame where we are today and help people to understand that we made it through before and we can still. And, Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address, right? We were in the midst of a civil war. The country was literally divided, brother fighting brother. And, we pulled some of that out. They tapped historians on Twitter to tell the story in visuals and in words that helped bring people together. And it was to see it actually come to life was so satisfying to me to see an idea like that, to be like, well, what does history matter today? Why do I need to focus on history when I'm dealing with TikTok and Clubhouse and NFTs and all the things of the future? Well, as you can see, history actually matters a great deal.
I just love that story. I saw it last night, I think on Twitter. And one of the things that I want to stress to the audience is if you want to follow Scott, he is quite the rock star on Twitter. It's at Scott Monty, Monty, Scott Monty. And so let's talk a little bit about your personal brand, because I know when you were at Ford and when I met you at South by Southwest, you were quite the celebrity as Scott Monty. And then you later left Ford. And so I think, wasn't there a transition because you were so much the brand? How did that work?
Well, it's interesting because I was Scott Monty before I got to Ford, believe it or not. Um,
You were? Ah, okay.
that one of the reasons I got the job at Ford is because we had spoken as an informal interview way back in December of '07. I didn't end up starting the job until July of '08. But I had lived in Boston for a while and was working like I am now, virtually, right? And back in 2007, that was almost unheard of. But I was working with a company that had offices in Second Life, and we took meetings on Skype, and we had AIM and all kinds of instant messaging. So I get this call from Ford, and over the course of the conversation, I said, "Well, would I have to move to Detroit for this job?" Having been born and raised a New Englander. And they go, yeah, this is, like a kind of a big executive job. You have to be at the world headquarters. And I went, yeah, not interested. And they said, are you sure? I said, yeah, but the timing just isn't right. Well, a few months go on. We ended up reconnecting. And I was more open to hearing about Ford. It was on my mind ever since then. I had seen it popping in the news with moves in the right direction. And they said, look, we would love to still talk with you. We've spoken with about 50 people. Your name keeps coming up. So why don't you come out here and humor us? Long story short, I did, fell in love with the company. They hired me. Boom. So it was because of my online reputation. It was because of engaging with people. I had a blog. I had a presence on various social networks that I had already established my brand. Now, when I got to Ford, there was a little bit of a crisis, you may recall, the global carpocalypse, as I like to call it, the meltdown, auto and finance at the same time. And, we had to do things flying by the seat of our pants. And a lot of what I did, I just engaged with people as me. Why? Because I already had the account, I had some following, and I had the credibility, which made a great deal of difference. And people appreciate when another human being speaks to them rather than a logo, right? It just feels more human. Now, it just so happened that Ford Motor Company was a very human company. The Ford family still ran it. The company's founder's name was on the logo. And Henry Ford was inextricably linked with the first 40 years of the company. So strategically, it made a great deal of sense as well. Over that time, like you say, rock star, yeah, I'll let you use that term. I don't think of it that way. To me, I'm the guy who still takes the garbage out every Thursday night around here. So people liked what I had to say. They trusted me. And when it was all said and done, I walked away from Ford and, kept my reputation intact and kept my followers in place and kept doing what I do.
Well, it was just an incredible success story because you took something that in many ways could be considered a boring car compared to, say, a Porsche or a sports car. A Ford, you know, give me the name of a Ford car: Ford Mustang, Ford Pinto. They're not sexy compared to a Porsche, but you gave it sex appeal. And I know the CEO of Ford called you a visionary, and that was part of your personal brand that blended over to the business brand. So what were some of the innovative things that you did to make that human connection to Ford and add that pizzazz?
Well, I think part of it is that I came to it as not a car guy. And I was just fascinated by the industry, having never experienced it up close before. And I brought that sense of curiosity and wonder and awe, quite frankly, to the job every single day. In December of 2008, about 6 months after I got there, we were doing a media preview event for the big auto show in January. This is where we would bring in about 100 business and automotive journalists. We'd let them peek under the covers to see what we were going to be revealing to the public. And then they could ask questions and we could, give them all the talking points, essentially. Well, we're in the showroom and all of a sudden these double doors burst open and in together, shoulder to shoulder, walk Alan Mulally, the CEO, and Bill Ford Jr., the executive chairman and great grandson of Henry Ford. And, these are the real rock stars at the company. I hadn't spent a lot of time with Bill, but I had with Alan. And I tweeted on my BlackBerry at the time that, hey, Bill Ford and Alan Mulally just walked in. And my fan said, hey, can we ask them questions? And I go, that is a fantastic idea. So I turned to Alan's communications director, who was there. Alan was surrounded by reporters in this scrum environment. And I said, hey, do you think Alan would take a few questions on Twitter? And she goes, yeah, ask him. So Alan comes out of the scrum and goes, hey, Scott, how you doing? And I go, Alan, would you be willing to take some questions on Twitter? And Alan goes, oh, absolutely. What's Twitter? I go, okay, but that alone should tell you all you need to know about the guy, right? That he is willing to engage with people regardless of the platform and regardless of his understanding of the platform, just so enthused about having conversations, right? So we take a few questions for Alan, and I'm tweeting furiously as he's dictating them back to me. And then we go, okay, time for one more question. And I turned to his communications director and I said, I don't know if we can actually get away with this because there might be some sensitive information. The question is, what vehicle do you drive, Alan? I said, can he answer that? She goes, watch this. I go, all right, Alan, what kind of vehicle do you drive? And he goes, Scott. And he grabs me by the forearm and it squeezes me. He goes, I drive a different car every day. And I go, oh, that's fantastic. You experienced the entire lineup of the Ford family of brands. And he squeezes harder, right? And with every word, he kind of shakes my arm. He goes, no, I drive all the competition's cars too. And I go, oh my God. Right there is a window into the mind of a CEO in the automotive industry, particularly the US automotive industry, that is different from everyone else because he is viewing things much more broadly than myopically, which was the story that Americans had been told about the big three auto for so many years, right? Because of moments like that, Liz, because of the excitement I had as an outsider and to come into this with that sense of wonder that I mentioned before, that was the kind of thing that excited me. And I thought, if other people knew about this, their minds would be blown.
I love that story because I call it the story behind the story or the PR magic. Because when clients come to us, and I'm sure same thing with you, they want to sell the shiny object. They want to sell the car. They don't want to sell the personal story behind the story. And they say to me, I don't want to go on TV. I don't want to talk about myself. And I say, well, guess what? You need to, because you need to make that emotional connection.
Absolutely.
So,
Because look, every industry you're in, I don't care whether it's cars, whether it's software as a service, whether it's candy bars, it's a commodity, right? If people don't buy it from you, they're going to buy it from someone else. So what differentiates you? It's how you tell your story. It's not the product, it's the people and how the people get motivated to tell that story about, why you're in business to begin with, or what you did to bring that product to the market, right? That's the fascinating part, the story behind the story, just as you said.
exactly. And the power of why, and why did you do this? That is so important. So I want to ask you about something else that's related to Ford. I know Ford really was being innovative, and you had a reality TV show, and that was also getting people to connect with the brand. So can you talk about that show and how that worked?
Yeah, that was a tie-up we did with, I think it was with NBC. It was called Escape Routes, and it was as we were debuting the new Ford Escape, and we thought, well, why not? And this is at the height of reality TV. There's certainly American Idol that Ford had been part of for a long time, but then you saw, oh gosh, where's the one where they got to vote people off the island?
Survivor.
Survivor, right.
Yep.
Survivor was a big one. And The Great Escape, and all of these things. And we thought, let's kind of grab this zeitgeist that we see and figure out a way to authentically involve the car without making it about the car, right? Make it about these people who are stuck together, right? Everybody loves drama in those kinds of situations. People that are competing against someone, right? I mean, that's a sports metaphor, and everyone loves watching sports. And the vehicle literally becomes just a vehicle for telling the story. It's not about the car, it's about what it enables people to do together. And we had, we tapped an official host on NBC, and we got Justine, who had been pretty famous on the internet at that point, to host a YouTube show. And you think about that now, and this was back in 2011, maybe 2013, somewhere around there. And you think about the YouTubers now and how much they've grown. We were trying different things to see exactly what worked and what didn't, and that was an example of a great success.
Yeah, I love Justine. We live in Santa Monica outside of LA. And so we've met her a couple times and actually interviewed her. And I also remember, she would be considered a key influencer, but I also remember being invited as an influencer to a party in Santa Monica. And it was like an escape routes launch party. And she was
Yeah.
there. And so, can you talk about how you worked with influencers too to promote that show and other things at Ford?
Yeah, Ford's work with influencers actually goes back beyond that. It began in 2009 with the Ford Fiesta, the Fiesta movement. This is like the granddaddy of all influencer marketing programs. Ford had been moving since 2006 when Alan Mulally got there toward a one Ford vision for manufacturing, designing, manufacturing, and selling cars all around the world, because Ford had just kind of grown into all these regional fiefdoms. And we thought, well, look, if we're going to make a car, the Fiesta, the Focus, right? Why can't these be the same all around the world, just like the Model T was in Henry Ford's time? So the Fiesta had just missed the window for making this a global launch. So it was going to launch in Europe about a year before it was going to launch in the United States. And we thought, well, why can't we take some of those European Fiestas, which are ostensibly going to be the same when they eventually come to the US, and give them to 100 influencers all across the country for 6 months, right? 6 months, free car, free gas, free insurance. And all they had to do was create one video a month, 6 videos over the course of 6 months. I mean, that you talk about a gift, right? Meanwhile, they had their YouTube channels, they had their Twitter accounts, they had their Flickr accounts, because this is pre-Instagram, if you recall. And they were going to do what they were going to do, which was create content. And they were going to be out there in the real world so people could actually see and experience the car at the same time. And then every month we'd have a theme, right? Here's the video you need to create. Maybe it's entertainment. Maybe it's about sustainability. Maybe it's about tech, etc. And so they did a phenomenal job creating content. And the genius then was we took all of that content, we took all of their RSS feeds, and we put them up on a Ford property, fiestamovement.com at the time. And we put it all out there, unfiltered, unedited by Ford. And that's what got people to pay attention, because they said, if Ford is allowing these other people to say whatever they want, they must be pretty confident in the product, and they must be pretty confident in that partnership that they've created with these people. At the end of the program, I think about 134,000 people registered on the dealers' sites to get the Fiesta when it came to market, which was at least 6x what we were expecting. And what's more is we saw a double bump as you look at the age distribution for the car. We expected this to be a millennial car, for the under 35 crowd. It turns out that was certainly true, but we saw a boomer generation that wanted this car as they were downsizing and moving into the city and empty nesters and all that. So it was a real wake-up moment for us. What's more, we actually got feedback from these influencers as they had the cars to give to our engineers who could actually make tweaks before the car came to market for the US.
That is just such an incredible story. I love that because influencer marketing, I mean, it has grown substantially now, but that is a wonderful example. And really, it's all about word of mouth marketing and getting other people to vouch for your brand. And by creating that program where all they had to do was create one video a month, I mean, how easy is that for influencers? And I'm sure they posted tons of other content. Can you talk about some of the other clients that you've worked with? Because I noticed one of the clients, you left Ford in 2014?
Mm-hmm, that's right.
And you went to a company called Shift. Is that an agency?
Shift Communications, yeah. They're based in Boston, New York, and San Francisco. And they've since been acquired. But it was a company I had known from my days in Boston before I left Ford, and was always impressed with their progressiveness in terms of communications and marketing. And while I was there, had a chance to work with T-Mobile, specifically John Ledger, who was a remarkable person both online and off. And he was a bombastic force in some cases, but he was a fighter. He wanted to fight to get T-Mobile to the point where it overtook what he called Larry Moe and Curly of the industry, Verizon, AT&T, and Sprint. And eventually they acquired Sprint. They got that big. And he was so invested in it that he would be on Twitter engaging with people and actually helping with customer service, customer care while he was there. It was just a fascinating man and fascinating company at the time.
Well, I did read that you worked with T-Mobile and I got so excited. And let me share why. Number one, my favorite color is pink. And T-Mobile's brand is all about this hot pink. So it definitely draws your attention.
Sure does.
But more importantly, I shifted to, there's a buzzword shifted, but I shifted to T-Mobile a couple of years ago because literally my friend dragged me in the store and said, you have to change. I was on AT&T and he said, and I had been on AT&T for 20 years. So he said, you have to change. This company is so hip. They're cool. They are offering all these promotions. So now I'm on a family plan with my mother and it's costing less for the two of us than it did with AT&T. But talk about some of the things that you did with them because they really are a great success story.
Well, they really are. And they were coming at it from an underdog perspective, which was not an unfamiliar territory for me, having worked for Ford. Ford was part of a comeback story as well. And I think people identify with that kind of thing. They like fighters. It's kind of an American ideal, right? The downtrodden patriots of the 1700s fighting barefoot in some cases, without supplies, without food, against one of the greatest armies in the world, right? That's exactly, and herein lies that secret between history and philosophy and business. Looking at inspirational examples like that and saying, yeah, we're going to take the same kind of fight. We're going to have an approach where we know we have a lot of struggles. We know we don't have the same kinds of resources as an AT&T, for example, but we've got a message, and we've got people, and we've got inspirational leaders who can tell this story for us. And it got to the point where, John, I mean, talk about a rock star. John is the rock star CEO. Um, People would go out of their way to tune into fireside chats that he was doing at conventions because they just loved the way he talked. Right? He started a Facebook Live every Sunday called Slow Cooker Sunday, right? Where he would invite you to his apartment in New York, right? It's usually where he spent his weekends. And he'd run through the recipe with you while singing to you or telling you about what's going on at T-Mobile this week. It was just his life. It wasn't a T-Mobile branded initiative, but it had the full support of T-Mobile, and it was consistent with everything he was doing on Twitter in terms of engaging with the fans. He would read the comments, he would get the feedback coming in, and most of all, he had fun. And I think T-Mobile as a brand just they just exuded fun. The partnerships they did with music entities, with concerts and other entertainment venues. I mean, they made themselves an attractive place to work. They made themselves an attractive service to want to get, and they had people that just enjoyed life.
And you could feel it when you walked in the store, and that they genuinely cared about helping you. So I want to talk about the customer service. But first, I want to share my experience, because when I went in there, I was very concerned because my mother's on the East Coast, I'm on the West Coast. She's in her 80s. I'm like, how is she going to do this transition? She's going to, be intimidated by the technology. And they sat down with me. They wrote down everything she needed to do. We figured out what store she had to go to in Baltimore. That's where I grew up. And they were ready for her when, and they had all the notes when she showed up, and it was a seamless transition. And now she can go back there anytime she has an issue. So can you talk about how they use customer service, but how brands are using social media for customer service too?
Yeah, I think this became early on one of the easiest use cases to foresee for social media. I mentioned John Ledger getting involved. I mean, he would go as far as to send people $20 gift cards and other like e-gift cards as they were following him on Twitter, and he would route complaints over to the customer care team. Because I think T-Mobile had a specific customer care handle on Twitter, as many brands did at the time, before the tools became a little more sophisticated on the back end. But at Ford, early on, I think 2009, I sat down with the head of customer service at Ford, and a very enterprising young woman who recognized digital was a place they wanted to get, and she brought me over to help plan out exactly how they would do this and to educate the entire customer care team. Right? It's spread to certainly to the airlines. They're always receiving complaints. QSR companies, McDonald's, Wendy's, etc. Anytime people have an opportunity to get a product or service and then give direct feedback about their satisfaction or dissatisfaction with something, social media becomes the place that they automatically do it. It's easier than an 800 number. It's easier than writing a review on Amazon. So it's table stakes at this point to have some kind of representation for customer care.
Exactly. I call it the free focus group.
Yes.
And you can get instant feedback. I also remember being in a retail store. A friend of mine owns a store, and her online payment system with Square was down. And she said, I've been waiting for 2 hours for a call, and I don't know when I'm going to get it back up, and I'm having to do this workaround right now. And I sat there and I sent a tweet to Square, and she got a call within 15 minutes. So a lot of people don't think about going to Twitter for customer service, but there really is a lot of great things that brands are doing, and they are listening. So I think it's just a great marketing tactic and customer service relationship builder.
Absolutely. Yep.
So let's see, what else should we talk about? I want to talk about, because we have about 10 minutes left. I want to talk about some of the newer platforms and your take on things like Clubhouse. So I noticed that you're doing something called a bedtime story, I guess, on Clubhouse. Can you talk about that? And then and any other platforms you think are the next thing?
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of audio, as you can tell from my microphone setup here, Liz. I'm not just some amateur coming
Yes,
to you. Sorry?
I was just going to compliment you. Your voice is
Oh,
incredible for broadcast.
well, thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Who knows? Maybe there's a third career for me here somewhere. I don't know. I've been a podcaster since 2007, right? So I'm no stranger to the audio space. Seeing the rise of social audio, as these apps are being called now, you've got Twitter Spaces, you've got Clubhouse. I'm actually I'm an early uh, user. I guess I'm on the founding group of an app called Fireside Chat that Mark Cuban is launching. Um, and there's probably about 20 more out there right now. I think it comes at the right time. We've seen an incredible rise in podcast consumption, particularly over the last 2 to 3 years. Okay, we've seen just screen exhaustion, Zoom fatigue. You've heard the phrase before, because everyone's in front of a screen during the pandemic all day long. They've got 11 back-to-back Zoom meetings. Well, even in real life, when you had meetings, when you had a lot of meetings, you'd be in a setting where you didn't have to maintain eye contact with someone or stare in one particular direction all day long, right? So getting over to audio, it's kind of like a relief from that. You still have that important voice to voice human connection, but you don't have to maintain the level of intensity that you do on video. My friend Jeremiah Aoyang said social audio is the Goldilocks medium, where text isn't enough, video is too much, audio is just right, right? So I think there's incredible opportunities there. And the way Clubhouse is being run, it feels less like a social media platform, like a Facebook or a Twitter, than it does like a high-tech replacement, or maybe an adjunct to a conference, right? Because you can go onto some of these Clubhouse rooms, and I'll just use Clubhouse as the example right now. And you can see a big name, and it's like a keynote address or a fireside chat, right? You've got a moderator and you've got the big star. In other rooms, it's a panel discussion where they invite people up, and they go through the whole panel and get everyone's input. In others, still they have people from the audience who can ask questions. It's kind of like standing at the microphone in the middle of the crowd there. It can be very interactive, right? So I think there's a whole range of ways to use Clubhouse. And one of the ways I decided to use it, because I don't have anything I want to particularly pontificate about or keynote about. I get called up to panels, and I'm glad to do this, but I wanted something of my own. So I'm a great lover of storytelling, as we've been talking about. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be a great venue for doing short stories, for reading short stories, right? I remember growing up every day, at least every weekday, listening to Paul Harvey. Paul Harvey, news and comment, right? And he would do his 5 minutes in the morning, he'd do his 20-minute broadcast at noon, and then at the end of the day, you'd have the rest of the story, which was a fantastic example of, a literary figure, a historical figure, a random person with a twist ending, right? And they were about 5 minutes long each. And I thought, if I could take something like that and apply it to Clubhouse, almost the way Mike Rowe has been doing the way I heard it, right? It would be a fascinating way to play with the platform. And I'm 2 weeks in now. I don't know if I'm going to have the stamina to keep doing this, or if I'm going to be able to find all of the stories that I'd like. I've reached out to Paul Harvey Jr. to see if I can read some of his father's stories, because I don't want to do those without permission. But I'm having a blast with it in the meantime.
I love that. And where can people find it? Is it go to the Twitter and join the Clubhouse group? Or
Yeah, I mean, if you search for Scott Monty on Clubhouse and follow me, you'll see the clubs that I'm part of down at the bottom of my profile. And there's a little pile of books in one of the icons there. That is the Bedtime Story Hour Club. You can just follow that.
I love it. I am not on Clubhouse, but you're inspiring me to do it and follow. So what else do you think is the future of social media besides audio?
Oh gosh.
I mean, do you think we're going to have Facebook in 5 years or Twitter? What do you
Yeah,
think?
probably. I mean, these are these are the old favorites, the old tired favorites now. I think they'll update. I mean, look at Twitter's experimenting right now with Twitter Spaces for audio. They will continue to evolve. It'll be interesting to see, in my mind, how any hearings go, any congressional hearings go with respect to regulation, antitrust, et cetera. I know there's been a lot of attention around the concentrated power within big tech and what their responsibilities are. I would like to see platforms that take things more responsibly. This is again part of my classics background and my push for the humanities, right? Philosophy, history, et cetera. These tech companies are very engineering driven. They've been founded by geniuses in computer science and engineering and user experience. And psychologically, they know how the human mind works. They know how to keep you coming back. They know what gets people to engage. At the same time, I don't think they've taken the long view, the philosophical view, the ethical view on some of this stuff, right? So I think we need more concentration. We need more thinking around the societal impacts here. And that's one of the things that appeals to me about Fireside Chat is that the founder there, along with Mark Cuban, is looking at how can people do good in the world? How can we take this and get like-minded people who are trying to force social change and to bring awareness to issues that affect us all and use the platform as a force for good, right? So I think we're going to see more of a push toward that in the future.
I love that you just brought that up because we try to focus with companies that are forces for good. And we started our PR company, Goody PR, Goody with a Y, because we started the Goody Awards for social good. And we were getting such an incredible reaction from that. Doing good, having a positive impact, making a difference is contagious. People love that and they jump on it. So we changed the name of our company to Goody PR for that reason. And we've had incredible growth just by changing the brand name and changing the focus.
That's incredible.
So as we wrap up, can you tell us where people can find you other than at Scott Monty? That's probably the best. And anything else you want to share that's a marketing tip or nugget?
Sure. Well, you can find me at scottmonty.com, which is kind of my blog and general personal website. And my newsletter, Timeless and Timely, you can find that at timelesstimely.com. That's where I write about this intersection of the past and the present. As far as nuggets, the thing I try to impress upon people is, curiosity is probably the greatest trait that any marketer, any communicator, any leader can have. And to be curious means to always be reading, to always be asking questions, rather than showing up as if you think you know everything. And as you ask more questions, I think you'll find out the less you know, which, again, we need more humility in leaders, and curiosity and humility go hand in hand.
And humility in marketing and PR and social media, because I teach social media at UCLA Extension, and I decided not to have a textbook. And I chose that on purpose because I said, it's changing every day and we're continuing to learn every day. So they do have a textbook as a backup if they're brand new to social media, but I don't really discuss it because I talk about what's in the news, what's in the headline, what's the trend, because it's always evolving and we just don't know all the answers. So I love that. And thank you. I really am just honored to have you as one of our first podcast guests. You're, such a great rock star. I know you don't like that, but you are in social media and branding and storytelling. And really, it's the power of story that makes a difference. So please go to scottmonty.com and thank you again. Get out there and make a difference.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank you for tuning in for this edition of 8 Second Branding. Keep checking back for new shows featuring your host, Liz H. Kelly, on the Voice America Business Channel.